Transformations, Women, Gender, and Psychology. Third edition by Mary Crawford. Chapter 7 continued. Sex, Love, and Romance. Hookup culture. The media have proclaimed that we now live in a hookup culture. Indeed, research indicates that between 60 and 80% of college students have experienced a hookup at some point. But before you conclude that romance is dead and college is all about girls gone wild, remember that the definition of hookup is vague. There has not been a huge and sudden change in sexual attitudes or behavior. Results from the U.S. General Social Survey in the 90s and 2012 show that people have not changed their attitudes about teenage sex or extramarital sex. They aren't having more different sexual partners or more frequent sex either. However, they are more likely to report sex with a casual date or a friend, and they are more accepting of LGBT sexuality. Social changes, yes, but hardly a whole new culture. Instead, older scripts of romance and commitment coexist with newer scripts of sexual freedom and independence. Those who endorse hookups express the belief that it's harmless and fun way to have sexual satisfaction without emotional commitment. It allows individuals to assert control over their sexuality, and it reflects their sexual freedom and autonomy. In one study, for example, college students described the benefits of hookups, sexual satisfaction, and positive emotional experiences. However, the hookups were better when they were with a previous partner, and they were emotionally better for men than women. Other studies show that the majority of college students, both female and male, say that they prefer committed romantic relationships to hookups and engage in hookups hoping that they might turn into a dating relationship. Positive feelings are the norm after hookups. However, regrets are also very common and are probably related to the high level of alcohol use typically of hookup situations. In one study, about 1/3 of women and nearly as many men who had hooked up in the past year said they likely would not have done it or would not have gone as far physically as they did if they had not been drinking. There are some gender differences in the hookup experience. Women are far less likely to have an orgasm in a hookup than in relationship sex, and men report more orgasms and sexual satisfaction in hookups than women do. There are several reasons for this orgasm gap. For women, experience with a particular partner, commitment, and affection all are linking to having an orgasm. Typically, these are lacking in hookup sex. Perhaps most important, when in-depth interviews have assessed attitudes about hookup partners, they have often shown that neither women nor men believe that women are entitled to pleasure in a hookup. It's more about his pleasure. The focus on male pleasure was expressed by a female student who said, "I will do everything in my power to like whoever I'm with to get them off, just because it makes me feel like I'm good at sex, because in a hookup, that's really all you have." Another woman described a degrading experience at a fraternity party when she gave oral sex to a partner and waited for a mutual response, only to have him fall asleep. A male student said, "I'm all about just making her orgasm," but when asked if he meant any specific her, he replied, "Girlfriend her. In a hookup her, I don't give a shit." Despite the rhetoric of sexual freedom, hookups take place in a context of gender inequality. In the hookup script, men are still more likely to be the initiators of sexual activity. They sometimes gain more sexual and emotional satisfaction from the interaction. Women may be pressured to exceed their sexual boundaries. When college students were asked to write about sexual encounters, nearly half the women said that the men should make the first move, or the male should always chase the female. Men agreed. They expected to take the lead because I'm the guy. The majority of students also felt that oral sex for women was for women to give and men to receive. As one man said, "She gave me a blowjob, but she's not getting any." A substantial minority of men said they would use aggressive tactics to get women to have sex with them. And hookups is not totally okay in the eyes of others. In a national survey, about half of college students said they would lose respect for both men and women who hook up a lot. Others, more men than women, said they would lose respect only for women who hook up a lot. These results suggest that there is a line one must walk when engaging in casual sex, and that line is different for women. Although women aren't judged as negatively for casual sex today as they were in the past, those who participate in too many hookups are still called sluts. Of course, nobody knows exactly how many is too many. An invisible line is the hardest one to walk. Internet dating. My neighbor Lauren had been married and divorced twice, but she wasn't ready to give up on love. Living in rural New England on a small farm with ducks, chickens, dogs, cats, and 2 horses, she didn't get out a lot and didn't meet many eligible men. Then, she signed up on an internet dating site for horse owners. Lauren figured that anyone who had the empathy and nurturance to take care of a horse had to be a nice guy. She soon met the man of her dreams. Within 6 months, after many intense online chats and 2 brief meetings, Lauren sold her farm, shipped her horses across the country, and married Ethan. To date, Lauren, Ethan, and their 7 horses are living happily ever after on his farm. This is a true story. I've changed Lauren and Ethan's name, but not the number of horses. Ever since internet dating was invented, it has revolutionized the way people find romantic partners. Instead of being limited to the people in your hometown, your church, or the local bar scene, you now have access to millions of potential partners. Not only that, you can communicate with them for as long as you like before you actually meet them, by email and chatting on your computer. And many dating websites promise that they can find your perfect mate by using scientific methods or mathematical algorithms to match you with your compatible partners. In other words, they claim to know better than you do who is 100% right for you. Online dating is different from old-fashioned conventional dating, but it is better. But is it better? In some ways it is. As Lauren and Ethan's story shows, it can bring people together who otherwise never would have found each other. This can be a huge benefit, especially for minority groups, people in rural areas, and so on, where women and men are kept segregated from each other, such as the Middle East. Internet dating sites allow young women and men to talk to each other and begin to understand each other as human beings. Even if they cannot meet in person, the ability to talk freely with someone of the other gender is an important step in loosening traditional gender restrictions. On the other hand, the thousands of people that one can meet on dating websites are not really people. They are profiles, 2-dimensional representations of people. Because there are so many individuals and they are represented by photos and carefully crafted profiles, it is easy to objectify them and shop around as if buying a pair of shoes. Sadly, the attributes that are searchable, things like education, income, don't predict relationship satisfaction very well. Other attributes that aren't searchable because they take time to develop in interactions with another person, things like rapport, are better at predicting long-term relationship satisfaction. And curiously, the attributions that people say they prefer when looking for a partner often turn out not to be the same ones they actually prefer when they meet people in person. It seems we don't always know what we want in a partner. Men are more active in initiating encounters on dating websites. Women are more likely to wait to be contacted. Both women and men tend to contact extremely attractive and high-income people, the superstars of the websites, regardless of their own attractiveness or income. In other words, dating websites place a premium on attractiveness and income, even more than conventional dating does. Another drawback is that it's easier to lie and misrepresent oneself online than in person, and harder for the partner to detect deception. Almost everybody engages in some deception, taking a few years off their age or a few pounds off their waistline. Fortunately, the deception is usually minor, but how to know when it's serious, like omitting a prior marriage or 3? Dating websites that make extravagant promises about finding your soulmate contribute to a romantic myth that there exist one perfect partner in the universe for each of us. By the way, there is no published scientific research to support the claims made by these companies that their scientific methods or mathematical algorithms produce more compatible matches. Instead, over 40 years of social science research has shown that the individual personality traits and attitudes they use for compatibility matching do not predict relationship outcomes very well at all. The long-term outcomes of relationships are affected more by social stressors, poverty, illness, and the interaction patterns of the couple, but you can't factor this in before the partners have ever met. The subtle scripts of sexual initiatives and pleasure. The hookup script is one of sexual freedoms and the enjoyment of casual sex without shame. However, underneath the freedom lurks some old-fashioned beliefs that it is still more often that the man's right to initiate sex, that his pleasure is more important than hers, and that how much hookup sex is too much may be different for him and her. In online dating, too, men still initiate more interactions, and it is easy for people to be treated like commodities. It seems that some age-old belief about gender and sexuality still pervade contemporary sexual scripts. People are emotionally vulnerable in sexual encounters. The women who want to initiate sex and the man who wants to say no more fear being rejected and labeled as deviants. It feels more comfortable and secure to follow familiar patterns as expressed by this British 16-year-old girl being interviewed by a researcher. Interviewer: do you think boys always take the lead? Respondent: yeah. Yeah, and do you want them to? Or, yeah, definitely. It's tradition. Yeah? Why? Does it feel better or does it? I don't know, I just think they should. Yeah? 'Cause I wouldn't, so I would expect them to, really. So why wouldn't you? I don't know, 'cause I'm a girl. Boys seem to agree, and research shows that this aspect of sexual script is slow to change. In a study of male college students in ongoing relationships, more than half said that they initiate sex either all or most of the time. The reasons they gave included, I'm the man, she's a girl. It's not in her nature. And I'm more aggressive, more of a top, more dominant. Interestingly, most of the men who were in charge of sexual initiation in their relationships said they would like it to be more equal, although they were not actively trying to make this change happen. Satisfying sex depends on communication, learning, and initiative on the part of both partners. In a study of a community sample of 104 couples in a long-term relationship, the unsurprising results showed that sexual self-disclosure helps the partners understand each other's needs and contributes to overall relationship satisfaction as well as sexual satisfaction. These results held for both women and men. Being able to talk about sexual likes and dislikes helps couples establish and maintain mutually pleasurable sexual scripts. Sexual scripts and sexual dysfunction. Because our society does not give women the same permission to be fully sexual that it gives men, women may express less sexual joy. A meta-analysis showed that women express somewhat more anxiety, fear, and guilt about sex than men, as well as less sexual satisfaction. Other research suggests that women in heterosexual relationships experience less pleasure and sexual activity than their partners. In national samples, women were much more likely than men to report lack of interest or pleasure in sex, and men reported more emotional and physical satisfaction in their relationship. Acceptance of traditional sexual scripts is implicated in women's sexual dysfunction and suppression of desire. Sexual pleasure and orgasms require an awareness of one's own needs, plus a feeling that one is entitled to express those needs and have them met. Women's recognition of themselves as sexual beings is blocked in many ways by cultural influence. For example, women may feel guilty or selfish about having needs and fear their partner's disapproval if they express their needs. In a study of over 600 dating couples, the women on average reported that they felt less confident about their ability to talk about sex, health, pleasure, and sexual limits than their male partners reported. Those with less traditional attitudes about sexuality were better at communicating about sexual issues and more comfortable with initiating or refusing sex. Objectifying also affects women's sexual pleasure. Objectification theory predicts that when women are sexually objectified, they will come to objectifying themselves, causing alienation from their own bodies, including sexual dysfunctions. Several studies have found relationships between self-objectification and women's sexual functioning. Women who self-objectify worry about their appearance during sexual activity, which interferes with joyous sex. When a woman is treated like an object for the gaze of others, she may lose the ability to distinguish between her sexual desire and her desire to please. Her sex life may feel like a part she is acting or a service she performs on demand. Social context and sexual expression. Sexuality, including beliefs, values, and behavior, is always expressed in cultural context. It is social, emergent, and dynamic. Cultural variation in the U.S. African American women are burdened by sexuality stereotypes that are promiscuous, sexually available, and seductive. The Jezebel archetype discussed in Chapter 3 lives on. In one recent study, college students judged paired photos of an African American and a white woman. They judged the African American woman as having had sex with more people, less likely to use birth control, and more likely to have been pregnant in the past, reflecting the stereotype of black women's sexuality as less disciplined and controllable. Ironically, research shows few differences in the sexual behavior of African American and white women of similar social class. But when there are differences, they tend to be in the direction of more conservative behaviors for African American women. Like black women, Latinas in the U.S. are a diverse group with respect to social class. In addition, their families come from many different countries, including Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guatemala, and Mexico. Despite this diversity, there are some commonalities affecting romantic and sexual attitudes and behaviors. Because of historical influences and the Catholic religion, virginity is an important concept. In Hispanic cultures, the honor of a family depends on the sexual purity of its women. The Virgin Mary is presented as an important role model for young women, and abstaining from sex before marriage is stressed. The religious influence on Latinos and Latinas affect behavior. In research using national data sets of teens and young adults, those who identify as more religious consistently engage in less risky sexual behavior.